In this episode of the Energy Lab podcast, I'm interviewing Carol Amendola D'Anca, a board-certified nutritionist who travels extensively in the pursuit of the holy grail of health and longevity.
What is longevity? People think of it as different things. I was really naive. I started out with all this scientific information and had no idea what was going on under the surface. I just couldn't believe the state of the diets and the lifestyle and the amount of medications that we have in the United States here.
Carol also has a first-hand experience within the longest living population worldwide. Leveraging her Italian heritage, she's captivated countless individuals from the US to Italy, inviting them to discover and embrace the true essence of the Mediterranean lifestyle.
Or the blue zones of the world, fascinating, but it's not always how you read about it or you see it on Netflix. It was rugged, it was rocky, life was not easy. When I went to the blue zone, what I wanted to know is, what are these people eating? And I learned the rest, the pillars of longevity. That's really not my approach to longevity. Why do these people not get depressed? Why do they have such good mental health?
In this interview, Carol shares the vital pillars that enable people to live long and healthy lives. She offers a refreshing and also unique perspective on longevity that stands in strong contrast to the views of the mainstream experts.
86% of Americans are not eating vegetables, and people are eating 3 times a day meat with saturated fat. You can get a burger for $1 and fill yourself up with some fries, and then that's not very expensive. I don't know how you can not pay attention to the corollary. The top 5 causes of deaths are deeply correlated to diet.
Welcome, Carol, to the Energy Lab podcast. I'm super excited to finally talk to you, Carol. Thank you very much for being here as a guest at the Energy Lab podcast.
You're welcome. It's nice to be here.
Wonderful. I had so many questions for you. So since we have a limited time and probably some of them would require a whole episode, I selected a few questions that I'm sure our audience will also be taking advantage of learning something, and the topics are super exciting. So I'm looking forward to our conversation. And
thank you.
I know that you are, I always said, for me, you are the expert for longevity, for all the things that I know from you and your experience, your background. So I would love to share more about it. And especially your travels to Sardinia, and also the experience you had in the so-called blue zone, so the longest living population. I'm sure there is a lot you could share, but if you would highlight a few of the things that stayed particularly with you, what would you like to share with us?
Well, first of all, the blue zone is a fascinating place, or the blue zones of the world, fascinating, but it's not always how you read about it or you see it on Netflix. That was one of the things that really surprised me when I actually packed myself up and went to the blue zone of Sardinia. And I expected, like this life, this perfect life of Shangri-La, that everything was just so perfect. And it was rugged, it was rocky, life was not easy. And I was so fascinated that people are not only living to 100 and beyond, but that they weren't sick, and the area that I stayed, and I stayed there and I interviewed the lead scientists, or rather they interviewed me. We went back and forth in conversation. And they said that it wasn't an easy life, but the people had enjoyed this longevity. So that was one thing that surprised me. The other was when I became a nutritionist, when I got my license, went through my internship and was board certified and started seeing clients, patients, I just couldn't believe the state of the diets and the lifestyle and the amount of medications that we have in the United States here. I was really naive. I started out with all this scientific information and had no idea what was going on under the surface, because I grew up with the Mediterranean diet. I grew up in an immigrant population in the United States, but everyone was recently from Italy. I didn't even know you could buy pesto. I didn't know some of these brands in the freezer that people were buying. And I saw very sick vegans, vegetarians, people of all diet types that just wasn't working for them. And then looking at the long list of medications, I didn't understand even all some of these medications. So those were two big takeaways for me when I started in this business, if you want to call it a business.
Yeah, that's the reality check probably was the hard part. But I really like what you said about the it kind of romanticizing what's the right English for it, for this beautiful, perfect life. That it's good that, you know, probably it's the storytelling of Netflix that makes it so beautiful and perfect. But yeah, but it's something that would be definitely worth seeing in real life.
I was just looking at it from a nutritionist perspective, but I quickly learned that you know their diet was not necessarily perfect. When a shepherd had to go out to the woods and live with his sheep and his goats for 4 and 5 months at a time because they didn't own land to come back home every night. I mean, their diet was not so perfect. Um, and that was, you know, that was a real learning experience. But then what I learned when I learned the rest, the pillars of longevity, it's so much more than diet, you know, there, and we know what they are now. You know, this all started in late 1999, I think it was, at a conference in Paris. And all these people that were involved in demographics came, and scientists, and papers were presented. And then when National Geographic took a trip to Sardinia to really see if, you know, what was being talked about was accurate, that's when it kind of blew up. I didn't realize when I got into this that, I mean, I did it purely for scientific and for nutritional reasons, but it's become an industry now. I mean, we now have Blue Zone vitamin pills, we have Blue Zone soaps, Blue Zone drinks, Blue Zone laboratories, people that are, you know, there are 700 independent laboratories now that are on a quest to find, you know, how long we can live and learn about longevity. It's kind of exploded. That's really not my approach to longevity. My approach to longevity is not to make it more complicated, but to learn the ancient wisdom from the people that have experienced it and then back it by science, then either do the research or measure it with the research. And that's why I was so happy that I did get to sit down and talk with 3 of the lead researchers of the Blue Zone of Sardinia.
Carol, if you would define or describe the real definition of longevity, if you would describe it somehow and also highlight how is it different at exactly what you're just saying, telling us about the mainstream, the those fancy brands and everything going on, how is your approach different, going back to the in real life experiences? To make it simple, you just said it, it's to making it too complicated, but if we go to the principles and really explain someone that never had to research and doesn't know the, you know, the specific word, something simple, what is it and what's the essence of it, of longevity?
Okay. Yes, the simplicity of the Blue Zone is there. And we've learned this from 5 regions in the world now. We've learned it from Sardinia, from Icaria, Greece, from the Nicoyan Peninsula in Costa Rica and Okinawa. They even say Loma Linda, California is a Blue Zone, although I don't know if it's been validated by the researchers. But we've learned this from them. And then some of these Blue Zones are going away. So we have to preserve this and make sure that this is being taught and incorporated into the scientific literature. So there's pillars of the Blue Zone, and diet, of course, is huge. I went to one place where we picked our lunch. We didn't go to the grocery store. The grocery store was about as big as my kitchen here in my home. But diet is huge, but it's not the only thing. The resilience of the people was extraordinary. And when I went with Dr. Fastamy, she has done extensive research on why do these people not get depressed? Why do they have such good mental health, even though they have such a low economic status? Because usually economic status is an indicator of, mental illness. I don't want to tag it on anyone or any group, but there's a large correlation. These people they are not wealthy people. They worked hard all their life and they have humble homes. And by American standards, they have very, very little, but they have high mental health, high resilience, meaning that they come back from disappointments. They have a way of accepting what happens in the world and moving on with their lives. One woman who is 102 years old said to me, "We didn't waste our lives trying to change things that we couldn't change, that we knew we couldn't. We just kept going." And this lady had lived through the pandemic of 1918. She had lived through two world wars. I mean, these were extraordinary stories, and she was happy and grateful for everything. Besides resilience and besides diet, of course, they have less stress because they have a network of people around them. They've been doing social networking all their lives without the internet. They care for one another. They watch out for each other. One of the things that was so extraordinary to me is there were no locks. No, there were keys in the doors of people's homes, but they were never locked. So if you needed help or if somebody wanted to stop by, the door was never locked to them. And another thing is that they don't retire. I mean, of course, women continue to work in the kitchen and help with their kids and their grandkids and their communities. The men will find other things to do as well. There was one 94-year-old man that after he could no longer work as hard as it took to make a living there, he opened a coffee bar. So at 6 o'clock in the morning, he opens his coffee bar and his friends come for, an espresso, and they meet and they talk. And we have learned that all of these things together as a symphony are really what makes up longevity. And there's no magic bullet, and no one has ever taken a vitamin pill there. I didn't see a hospital. I didn't see a workout place. I didn't see a nursing home. It was just extraordinary. The problem with that, if there is any problem, is when I bring people back to the United States, and we're going to the Blue Zone in September, but I don't take them there every time, but still in small villages in the south of Italy, that the society in the United States and most industrial countries is not set up for that kind of lifestyle. So then you get back home, and then what do you do? You look around and, there's food 24/7. There's people jammed into restaurants and a lot of illness. So then that's when the work begins. It begins first with the inspiration of the people that see this and learn about it. And then what are they going to incorporate in their lives from this? I'm just doing my newsletter for this month, and my newsletter is going to be to simplify. My newsletter is longevity tips. There's one longevity tip every month that is sent out to my membership, my readership. And if you just take that one thing and integrate it and learn about it for a month and try to express it, you could transform your life in a year in 12 of these. So what brings me back to this month is to pick one of these pillars, just one. If you feel you need to be moving more, go take a 10-minute walk. If you need to clean up your diet, just get rid of the processed foods gradually. Call a neighbor, call a friend, call someone that needs you. Start to do this social networking. These are things we really can do, even though our lifestyle here or in other industrialized countries doesn't express it. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. Thank you for it. You did a very high level and extensive at the same time overview. I think that's the real challenge, right? Because there is no other places that looks exactly as that one village in Sardinia, if not in similar places, but not in cities, not just in US, but not even in other European places, if not with that kind of lifestyle. So that's a real challenge. And that's fantastic what you are doing, giving the inspiration. That's we learn and we change by inspiration. Example, that seed in our mind is what it will we will find a way, a different way. It's not going to be the one of the blue zones exactly, but one step at a time we will find some small changes that make bigger differences. You mentioned the topic food nutrition as one of the different pillars. Do you want to share any details? Because yeah, there is a lot of talk about, of course, supplements. You mentioned that they don't take any pills. Thank you for saying that. This is another very interesting topic. But is there anything in particular that you noticed in Sardinia that that can be translated into behavior change when people go back to US? Like, which are the key food choices apart from processed food, not processed food? Is there anything that people are taking with them and implementing?
Yes. Well, if we go to food, which is huge, the one thing, we hear about it all day. We're kind of bombarded with complexing information, but reduce the processed food. Reduced. The people in Sardinia and living in the blue zones, they have one ingredient foods. In other words, their foods don't need a label. They have their own gardens. And it's not just in this blue zone area of Sardinia. And I'll come back to that, but it's anywhere in small villages in Italy where they're still expressing the Mediterranean lifestyle. They have gardens. When I go to my family's home or a friend's home in Italy and I'm invited for dinner, all I need to do is look out in the garden, and what's ready is going to be incorporated into the meal. Very little meat, very little saturated fat in their diet. I took a group to the Mediterranean Diet Museum where Ansel Keys discovered the Mediterranean diet, and the guide there said that his grandfather ate meat twice a year, 2 different holidays. Now I've looked at, diet, dietary intake lists, and people are eating 3 times a day meat with saturated fat. So it's just and again, here people don't have gardens to do that, but there are farmers markets. I always say you can buy organically grown food frozen in 3-pound bags at most big stores, and just use what you need. Don't use it as an excuse to say I don't have a garden, or living in a cold climate, you don't grow things all year long. There are still ways that we can get around that. But they do drink wine, a small glass of wine. When I bring a group to my family's home, they put out a beautiful table of all foods that are made right there in the kitchen, and always a cold pitcher of wine. But the glasses are 4-ounce glasses. No one's drinking big glasses of wine, and it's their own homemade wine. So what I learned, though, is the wine that they use in Sardinia and the Blue Zone can also be purchased in the United States. It's called Cananu wine, and it's made with it's fermented with a grape that is high in resveratrol. That doesn't mean we should be drinking big glasses of it, but if you can get wine without these preservatives, it's much better for you. And they cook. I mean, they love to cook. And I do it at home here in Chicago. When I'm here, I'll take, a big, huge platter of vegetables. I will slice them in different ways. I'll put them on the grill, or in the winter, I have a grill pan, and I just grill them all to perfection. And I don't think many people realize there's natural sugars in vegetables, and they will caramelize when you slowly grill them, and they're so delicious. And then I put them in a tray, and every home in Italy that I've been in has the same thing. It's a glass tray. Maybe you've seen it in Sicily, and it's got the grilled vegetables for the week. So if you're going to have pasta, you're going to maybe toss them with some vegetables. If you're going to have a sandwich, the vegetables are in the sandwich. If you're going to have a snack, it's, vegetable. If you're going to have a side dish to a piece of fish and something else on your plate, there's going to be a side dish of those vegetables. I mean, that's just this one simple thing that we can incorporate. And we know that 86% of Americans are not eating vegetables to any amount. So I don't want to overspend time on it, but that's one thing that we can learn to do and start doing and up the nutritional value of, our diet and our health.
Many says that it's expensive. Eating healthy, it's expensive. That's something that I've been hearing often from people based in US or from Americans when it's okay, yeah, in Italy it's easy, everything is cheap, but it's expensive. So I never lived longer than 1 month in a few American cities, so I don't have that experience. But is it true? Like if you compare it, since you have both backgrounds, is it true that eating healthy it's so expensive that people, or is it an excuse? I don't know. What is it?
Yeah. Gee, that's a great question. It depends what you're comparing it to. If you're comparing it to going to McDonald's or a Burger King, yeah, you can get a burger for $1 and fill yourself up with some fries, and then that's not very expensive. But if you compare it to what it does to your health, it's not expensive at all because it's no bargain when you're eating cheap food like that. And then I've had people say to me, it's expensive, and they're holding a cup of Starbucks coffee that's $6 a cup. So what are we comparing it to? I think one reason the Italian population, and I'm sure there are others, and there are other cultures as well, but I know the Italian one, but I know that that's how immigrants that came here did so well. They helped each other. You could, with a few eggs and some flour and a garden, you can feed a family. My grandfather fed 11 of us with one garden. My aunts would get together and they would can and preserve, and the food was so delicious. So no, I don't think it's expensive. It's a matter of priority. And I know, and I will give credit that there are food deserts. There are places that, don't have stores close by, that don't sell the fresh produce. But that's kind of changing. Old basketball courts are being ripped up in New York City and they're being turned into community gardens. It's just what we're willing to do to make a difference. But yes, I had a friend from Italy come and live here for a couple of years, and she said, I don't understand. In the United States, the clothes are cheap and the food's expensive. In Italy, the food is cheap and the clothes are expensive.
It makes more sense, I would believe, in terms of priority for life, right? But it's economic, I don't know, patterns or mechanisms that sometimes have other reasons that we cannot explain rationally for needs, human needs, but more for money.
I
Exactly
don't know.
to this point, tell me.
I don't know how you can not pay attention to the corollary. The top 5 causes of deaths are deeply correlated to diet. So, what's expensive? You want to spend $300-400 a month on medications to just treat symptoms, or try to prevent these things with the diet. And there's good science to back that up. That's not my opinion. That's what we know today. So it's priority.
Priority. That's the number one, the beginning and the end of all choices and changes. Talking about the exactly the value of cooking, of preparing things, how can we help people making it easier? If someone listening says, okay, I don't have time, we discussed expensive, but the time, is it, I mean, you have longer and deep experience in topic nutrition as a nutritionist, as a nutrition coach. I have more on the behavior, so we have definitely a bit different perspective, but at the same time, definitely same topic. So how can we make it more attractive? How can we help better people and help them to eat less out or home delivery, or reduce home delivery, which is not the healthiest way of getting nourishing
Mhm.
food many times.
Well, I did this. I tried this for about 7 years into my practice. And I actually I set up a little cooking school, called the Academy of Plant-Based Nutrition. And 2 Saturdays a month, I would have people come, clients or people on my newsletter list. I could take 12 at a time. And I taught them how simple it can be. But I realized I learned more from my people that came than maybe they even learned from me, because I learned we've left our kitchens, we've left our gardens, and the lifestyle has changed. Eating out has become kind of a sport almost, like, oh, there's a new restaurant, we're going to go and check it out. Or carrying in has become something of convenience. So when I would hand someone a red pepper, for example, there were people that didn't know what to do with that red pepper. They had not really even cooked with real food in such a long time, but they loved it and they enjoyed it. And we made extraordinarily delicious dishes. So what can we do to make it more simple for them? Because I spoon fed them. I worked for days before and cleaning up days after to do these classes. And they came and they loved it, but they have to be willing to make some adjustments in lifestyle. Instead of coming home and changing and going out to eat, they have to just be able to prepare some simple meals. And what I suggested to a lot of people is cook once and eat twice. Cook a bigger batch of something and then save it and then have it again in 2 nights. Leftovers still do work. Or to just try one new thing a week. Don't try to revolutionize your diet and the way you're living overnight, because that I saw doesn't work. I used to be carrying the baton. You have to do this, you need to do that, and that didn't work. So, but one night a week, stay home. One person told me, my grandparents lived into their to be 100. I don't know what they did. They just cooked at home and walked a lot. Well, that's simple until you try to put it into practice. You have to be willing to do that. I published a cookbook, Real Food for Healthy People. There's no sugar in that cookbook. There's no flour. I mean, there's some delicious, I took my Mediterranean recipes and I just adapted them for anyone. Now there was some pushback. People just said, I can't do this. I won't do this. And so that's everyone's choice.
That's the point. That's a choice. Like all important things, it's about a choice and making or not making it a priority, as you said previously.
I'm sorry.
I believe that's the main point.
I think the screen froze up.
And there is another link that brings you to Italy every year. You mentioned before, when you talk about the blue zones, you're running successful trips to Italy with Americans. What do most Americans admire when they come to Sicily, or you go to often to Napoli or
Yeah, they
Sicily
can't
or
believe
Calabria,
it.
wherever you've been?
When I
What
was
are
running
the
into the
wow things
problems with
that
trying.
really people coming with you on those adventures experiences like most?
Okay, I'm sorry, you might have to edit some out because you were cutting in and out.
Yeah,
Um,
I saw, but I realized it before. Usually, I can cut this one. Doesn't matter. But usually, it catches
it
up
keeps happening.
with that one. So if not, I will cut it. Yeah, I see it's frozen. Can you hear me? Yeah,
I can
can
hear
you hear
you
me?
now, but yeah,
Okay, I will repeat the question just in case there was some challenges. Okay, okay. So
okay.
Carol, you're running. Tell me, and then I will start again. You wanted to say something?
No, no, I'm waiting for you.
Okay, okay. Carol, you are running successful trips to Italy and bringing over Americans with you. What do most of Americans admire when it comes down to the Italian lifestyle?
Well, first of all, they cannot believe the taste of the food. They are just amazed. They cannot believe the pace that people live at. And we go to small villages, but we also go to my city of Napoli, and they see that it can be chaotic, but still people have rest built into their lives. They live they may work hard, but they also rest hard. They're, of course, taken with the stunningly beautiful, climate and scenery. And they're also very surprised at how people still stay together. When you have friends and you meet friends maybe a couple times a week to just sit and have a coffee or just relax. It's not like in the United States where you have a schedule, you put a time and a place and you go meet someone and then you go back home. Life is so much more integrated. And that Italians are talking all day long. They stop at the bar 4 or 5 times a day to have a little espresso. They're talking to their friends. They're talking to each other on the street. And they can't believe it. My one cousin said a couple of years ago, your people are fascinated. Your people that you bring are fascinated with how we live. And if I take them into the country and they see these gardens and they see the simplicity of life, they're stunned, because truly the people that travel with me or can afford to go to Italy can you can pretty much buy what you need. You can buy your food, your clothes, you can buy a car, you get a decent house, but you go over there and you can't buy that. That just has to be there. It has to be, part of the lifestyle. And that's what they're so amazed with. And that's why I started doing these trips. I started doing them 10 years ago. And I would say to the first few clients, diet's important, but if you want to see lifestyle that goes with it, come with me next year when I go to Italy and I'll show you. And it started out as a small little group of, 8 or 9 people. And now I cut it off at 22 people because I wanted to still maintain its smallness and personalness. But what's happening is people will go on a trip and they come back and they say, wow, my eyes are open. And they're coming back with their families, with their cousins, with their aunts, with their sisters, brothers. And it's just such a different look into life. And I think what's happening is there's more of an awareness now, even in the United States, that something's a little off, that we have given up, the population has given up a lot to become a superpower. This industrialized way of life is not necessarily, well, it's not been good for lifespan. I mean, the average lifespan in the United States is like 77 or 79, number 47 on the scale of life expectancy. In Italy, it's 85. Even though we spend all this money and have all this technology, that it's, you could live another 7 years just by, with some lifestyle changes.
That's a lifespan, but the quality of life, I think sometimes it's even more important. We talk a lot about longevity and lifespan, but sometimes I believe we should start talking more about the quality of life in those years, right? Because you can also live long, but if you then are taking pills to survive or are not self-sufficient, then that's connected, of course. But I think this is another topic that we should integrate more in the conversation. Like, how do you want to live in that time? It's not only about the longevity. Yeah.
Yes, like what is longevity? People think of it as different things. How long can you live? Or how long are you expected to live? Or what's your health span? Instead of your lifespan, how long can you live and really enjoy your life? I mean, who wants to live to 100 if you're, somebody else is feeding you for the last 10 years? There are just a lot of different components. To me, longevity means living a long, purposeful life where you enjoy health, you enjoy your family, you enjoy, you give gratitude for all that you have. That's longevity to me.
Yeah, you added one point to the list, the purpose. I mean, it's linked to the threads and the pillars that you described at the beginning, but I think that purpose is again one of the reasons why people don't stop working, as you mentioned, like why they open a bar instead of retiring. What's the meaning of retiring? We live in a culture where people go for jobs and then look for retirement, so to start enjoy life. But at that
Yeah.
time, if you haven't taken good care of yourself, what are you going to enjoy? Probably not in a healthy way, or probably struggling to walk and be free. What's the concept of freedom behind? That's lovely. I am a super fan of what you are doing with the example of really showing in life and not just telling, because some stuff we need to see, experience, and live, not just to read and see somewhere, even if it's good as well, to read or watch documentary, whatever people like as inspiration is fine. But the ones that can really make it, they cannot afford it, then they all should come with you. Definitely, that's wonderful. Even if you have small groups, I understand it. I don't want you to make like huge groups. You keep it small, but it's something that it's for a lifetime. This is that has a huge value, the one that you're providing.
Yeah, I've also thought about, not everyone can go to Italy. So I've thought about like weekend retreats, or I could try to teach someone, keep it in the United States and over a weekend, do presentations or so forth. But I also want to mention this topic again about, circle back a little about longevity, because this whole thing has become such a business. And I am appalled that there are now retirement communities that start for people at the age of 55. I mean, 55, you're just starting your life practically. If you're looking at the really longevity, maybe that's pushing it a bit, but to get people to think at 65 they need to retire and go to warm climate, and I have visited people in those climates, and there's a lot of eating out, there's a lot of slow living. Maybe that's fine for a segment of the population, but to remain active is very important also.
Yeah, movement. Movement is life. I was not aware of those retirement.
Oh
What
yeah.
did you call it? What is it exactly? Communities,
A
clubs. What is it?
retirement community. Retire at the age, you have to be 55 to get in, but 55 is the entry level. So someone could live there 30 years. I mean, and
Okay.
there are retirement homes and people get together and there's a network there, but there's a huge one in the state of Arizona in the United States. Thousands of people live there. And there's another one in Florida. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe it works well. I have nothing against it, but it does seem to be that we're pushing the limit and making this more of a business than it should be.
Yeah, but I believe the overall, as you mentioned before, the overall longevity topics and all the products linked to it go beyond the real why we need to talk about it, why we need to educate ourselves about it, why we need to review our habits, our lifestyle, and why we should look for inspiration. So I think like today as consumer, each of us, like no matter what we do, we need to be very, very, very cautious about what we hear, read, and all the information. There's a lot of information around, and that's good, but you always need to look for the source and what it's behind it, right? So I think that
Mhm.
what you're doing, it's the genuine part of longevity that probably we need to take more as inspiration, and many other things that we hear because they are louder, they have more investments behind communication and whatever it's being pushed, and it's not for everyone. It's just for a few people that can afford it, very few people that can invest very much money to never die, like how not to die in that sense. Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
not what we need.
that's another one that's very interesting that has popped up. Now you can never, we can live forever. We can never die. And no, the science so far says we are no closer to that than we were 300 years ago. And there's a lot of research on this, but who knows? Maybe someday that'll be reality. It's
Yeah.
unproven.
We'll see. Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you for
You're
sharing
welcome.
all of the work you're doing. A little bit, not all the work. Some pieces of it, and especially some wonderful inspiration. How can people connect with you so that I can share some links and people can ask more questions or inquire if there are anything particular they want to learn more about?
Well, I did send a link, or I can send you a link to my newsletter, which is called Longevity Tips, and that I send this one longevity tip every month. If someone's interested in that, that might be interesting. My website I have a lot of recipes on my website, things that I developed when I was doing the classes, and there's a drop down box with all my trips, for the next year. And right now they're all filled. So I'm going to be putting other trips on there. But if you're just curious to see what an itinerary looks like for a lifestyle excursion, that's what it is. I'm on YouTube. I have a lot of videos on YouTube about olive oil. That's a whole nother topic for another day. And about travel and diet, and then LinkedIn. So I'll send you a link to my LinkedIn page as well. I'm pretty active there. Not every day, but active.
Wonderful. I will put all the links in the description. Thank you so much, Carol. It has been awesome as always talking to you. Lovely. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Grazie, grazie,
Thanks for everything you're doing. Grazie.
grazie a te.